Hello, it's Jez from youHQ. Welcome to this new webinar, Wellbeing Wins webinar from youHQ. I'm really pleased to have Nicola Harvey with us, mental health specialist in education. Hi, Nicola.
Hello, hiya.
How you doing? You well?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. And it's brilliant to talk to you on this webinar and gear it a bit more towards parents, because what we've done is we've gone from kind of making them quite school specific, and we'd really love to kind of pick your brains, Nicola. You've got such expertise in this specific area. And the title of this webinar is Building Resilience Together and Managing Anxiety. And I suppose they're two separate topics, but could you, for people that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah. So I'm Nicola Harvey. I'm a mental health specialist in education. I'm a former teacher. So I worked in schools, worked mostly with children with special educational needs. And a lot of those children had high levels of anxiety, low mood, and other conditions. I found myself on a bit of a journey and then decided to work in a mental health in a schools team, and absolutely loved it because I was on the ground working directly with children and young people. I found that when I was working in schools, a lot of my focus was on the well-being side, so zones of regulation, bringing in calming strategies to support their needs. And I have since gone on to develop my own business, Harvey Hill's Wellbeing Consultancy, where I deliver training to organisations, to schools, about mental health in education and basically the best ways to support children every step of the way. I also do things on teacher wellbeing and host reflective practice supervision as well. So quite a lot of different things that I do, but I'm really passionate about mental health in education, coming from that background myself as a qualified teacher and a mental health specialist. Alongside that, I deliver mental health first aid training as well. So I'm one of the youth mental health first aid England instructors. Again, really passionate about working with schools to make sure that people are equipped and they have the skills and knowledge and psychoeducation to support children in the classroom and at home.
You are, I mean, again, you're one of those people that we speak to that it takes so long to say everything you're doing because you do so much, but you are so important. And I want to pick apart some of that, because I wanted to find out firstly when you made the switch from being a teacher like I was across to kind of this specialist field of wellbeing and mental health.
Yeah, so I did that. I think it was probably about 6 years into my teaching. I love being in the classroom. I love working and supporting the children. But I sort of did that and decided it was time to make a change. It was becoming more about the paperwork than the individual children. And I was lucky enough to start off working in a special needs school. So I was surrounded by occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, ed psychs. So I sort of saw things from different avenues, and that was embedded into my teaching from day one. So when I moved into mainstream to sort of do good in mainstream, I found it really difficult because I'd had such a brilliant grounding with a therapeutic approach. I decided to make that switch sort of 6 years into my teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why I feel like I've always clicked with you, Nicola, because we both, I think, got to a point in our teaching career where it didn't always feel about the child. It felt a lot about the paperwork, like you said, the admin, the value added, the grade, the inspection. And yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And have you seen, since you've made that move across to what you do now, all the various things you do now, have you seen a real change in the climate for young people around mental health? Have you seen big obvious shifts? And we're obviously going to move on and talk about anxiety in a bit, but have you kind of noticed obvious shifts since you started doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had the pandemic, and I think that, I mean, mental health in schools was already an issue, but the pandemic has impacted things phenomenally. So I think it was 2019, there was a green paper that was released by the Department for Education and the NHS to start bringing mental health support teams into schools, which helped. But then we obviously had the pandemic. People's routines were off. We've got the cost of living crisis, and we're still almost in catch-up mode to try to get a grounded footing. So mental health, unfortunately, has increased, and funding and waiting lists, it's so unpredictable. If a child needs support, urgent support, they often have to go to A&E because waiting lists are too long, which is why more is being put onto parents and teachers to support them. So definitely the pandemic has had an impact. Cost of living crisis, social media, it does have good, but it can also impact mental health. So yes, it is on the rise, unfortunately. That's why it's really important for us to be doing things like this to normalise mental health and provide supportive strategies.
Thanks, Nicola. Yeah, so I wanted to come on to one of the areas where we kind of almost came together, which was this idea where we were asked to look at anxiety around a year ago as part of the Leeds Beckett University work. And I know you've done work with them as well. And I think we were quite shocked we had around 1,500 students, I think, take part in that particular project that we put out, which was a GAD-7 survey specifically looking at anxiety. And the results that came in for us, around 14% of students in that, and relatively small, I suppose, number of students, but still, 1,500 to 2,000 students saying that they were really suffering with anxiety, showing significant severe signs of anxiety. So again, you've touched on the pandemic and social media and the crisis in the economy and everything else. Is this something that comes up, anxiety specifically, as an issue around mental health? Is that something that is increasingly come up and is something that you are talking to schools about, potentially parents about more and more?
Yeah, definitely. And what we must remember is anxiety is a normal, natural emotion that we all experience from time to time. So the first time we go to school, first time we sit behind the wheel of a car, everybody experiences anxiety. And that's why it's important to have early intervention. So strategies and things within the school environment and at home. However, when anxiety is left, it then becomes a problem. So if we don't normalise anxiety and mental health, it becomes a mental health disorder. So we see children experiencing anxiety disorders like PTSD, OCD, various other conditions where they need sort of clinical intervention, which unfortunately is on the rise. So, but we must also remember that anxiety is normal. So early intervention is key. And whilst it is on the rise, sometimes it can be healthy to have anxiety. So if you're anxious about an exam coming up, it will make you want to study, it will make you want to sort of put together a revision plan. When you're when you're having sleepless nights and there's overwhelming unease on a continuous basis, that's when it's an issue. But sometimes anxiety can actually be a good thing, although it sounds really bizarre, but it's there to protect us and there to keep us safe, and which is why we all experience anxiety and natural emotion.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And that, again, really resonates with me. One of the things that we used to teach through GCSE and A-level PE was how you reframe those butterflies in your tummy, the physiological anxiety, the somatic anxiety. It can be reframed in a positive way as readiness for an exam, for a sports match, for a grade exam, whatever you're doing. But unfortunately, why do you think that actually anxiety is just as prevalent as it was, or similarly prevalent? It's more how we deal and cope with anxiety. Do you see that being the key difference now?
I think because we're talking about it a lot more. So I do feel that anxiety has risen, but I think there's more awareness. So we're more aware that anxiety is connected to our mental health, and people, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of social media, as a result of, friendship groups and different things impacting children today, people are talking more openly about their feelings. We've got celebrities going on TikTok and all these different things, being really open. What's his name? Joe, the PE's sports person, Joe Wicks, sorry, his name just suddenly went out. He's really big into mental health and uses physical exercise and food to support that. So when you've got big characters like that talking about mental health and well-being, children are going to pick up on that, and we're going to be talking about it a lot more. So I think on one hand it has risen for sure, but I also think the awareness of it has risen, which may contribute to why the amount of people saying they're experiencing anxiety has risen, because we're recognizing it more. The important thing is to normalize it and understand that it's okay to not be okay. That way we can feel better within ourselves. But it does go hand in hand with the level of the raised awareness that we have about anxiety.
And what sort of strategies? I know you've said you work a lot in schools, but I believe you work with parents, not officially one-to-one all the time, but you are doing some work with parents, aren't you, as well, Nicola? What strategies are you talking to parents about that they can do from home to support their children that might be struggling with their anxiety?
Yeah, so it's a really good question because, again, like I said, waiting lists are long and access to the right support isn't always there. So one of the main strategies I love to use is just talking about basic neuroscience. So Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Bryce have something called the hand model. And this is based on neuroscience. And he's sort of, the two of them have taught people from as young as 5. And it's a lovely way that parents, he's described this in the book, The Whole Brain Child, and it's targeted at parents, to get children to understand what their emotions are, like anxiety, and self-regulate. So I'm going to do a bit of basic neuroscience. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm just going to go through basic bits and how he would describe this to support children to help them self-regulate. So you have your hand, and this is, first of all, we look at the brain stem, and this is basically the foundation. This is where our sensory processing is involved. And this is the first part of the brain, also known as the reptilian brain. So this forms the foundation. And then we have the limbic system. This is where our emotions live. And this is where we are relating to people and how we feel and how we sort of connect with our own emotions. And this is where anxiety lives, alongside fear, alongside happiness, excitement. And the top part of the brain is the neocortex. And this is our executive functioning, which is why you and I are able to sit and have this conversation, look into the camera and have a conversation. And why, when you're in a classroom, you'll see a child sat, connected, learning, doing what they're doing. However, when a child at home or in school may be experiencing anxiety or some form of overwhelm, they may flip their lid and everything comes out. Then they're no longer grounded, regulated, together. They're flipping their lid and everything is coming out. They're not able to access the top part, the thinking part of their brain, regulate their emotions, or do anything sort of stable. So first of all, what we do to support the brain stem, we think about regulation. And this is where we start thinking about some really nice activities like breath work. So we're focusing on the senses. So we're focusing on what they can see, what they can hear, what they can feel. So we're focusing on those senses. So we might want to do some breathing activities. This is my favorite, the Hoberman sphere, where we get them to look at the breathing ball, breathe in as it goes nice and wide, and then breathe out as it comes back down together. Sensory activities may include listening to music. It may also include doing some physical activity, some other things that just grounds them so they're actually in the here and now. So then that's basically for the brainstem. The next part, the limbic area, so their emotions are wild, they're doing lots of different things. The next part is to relate to them. And this is where we're looking at the limbic system and we're relating. And as parents, as teachers, we're being empathetic, we're relating to them, we're listening to understand, we're creating a safe space, we're honoring that it's okay to not be okay and allowing them to just be. So it's creating that safe space and connecting with them and meeting them where they're at. And then the top part is the neocortex, where we reason with them. And this is where we can bring in things like thinking about the zones of regulation. So we can look at their different emotions, we can look at where they're at the moment, and we can help them get back into the green zone when they're ready. And the top part of the brain, the neocortex, is our problem solving. So what's actually happened? You know, what is going on now? That's fine. It's okay to not be okay. I can see that you are in the yellow zone. Which of these are you feeling at the moment? It looks like you're anxious and worried. What can we do to help you when you're ready get back into the green zone? It's okay. I see that you're not 100%. That's fine. And then you work with that child to do some additional activities. It may be that you go back to doing different breathing activities. You might go for a walk, drink water, but it's a case of using helpful strategies to support that child come back into the here and now. There's no right or wrong. One child if a parent has 2 different children, you're going to have 2 different personalities and 2 different ways of doing things. So it's really important to regulate their emotions, regulate them and meet them where they're at using their main senses, relate to them, human to human, really empathetic. And this is Dr. Perry's relate, regulate, reason. And then relate to them, have that empathy, and then reason. So really help them understand if they're ready to. So this is the cognitive part of the brain where we're just helping them problem solve, understand it's okay that they're anxious. What can we do to get you back into an optimal state where we can get you back into home life, doing what you were doing before? And it may take some time. It may not be a clear cut, this has just happened. But if a child is anxious, there will be. So when I spoke about the limbic part, this is the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, and as well as the brainstem. This is where they are just reacting. When we were cavemen, cavewomen years ago, we reacted and we responded, so it may take them time to regulate and come back and grounded. So hopefully that kind of gives you a few different ideas in terms of strategies, co-regulation strategies, how parents can support at home.
It seems like for me that is fascinating. And if I were a parent listening, and I am a parent listening as well, I totally get all of that. It all makes total sense. Relate, show empathy. One of the things that we talk about in this house is trying to show curiosity rather than getting annoyed with behaviour. But that is really hard. They're hard skills, aren't they, Nicola? So can you think of and I'm putting you on the spot a bit here. So let's say, the typical one possibly is that my son won't go into school because he's just so anxious and so nervous. And I guess that's something that comes up a lot.
Definitely.
And as a parent, all you want is you really want that quick fix as well, don't you? You want them to go to school because you've probably got work and a million things to do, but that's not what we're saying. There is no quick fix. So what in the moment, if you are that parent out there and your son or daughter is really struggling, they just won't go in, how can I relate? What could I do to show empathy in that moment and moving forward, rather than the default for a lot of parents, which will be sort of frustration and I don't know what the right word is. Not disappointment, but I'm sure parents out there really worry. They genuinely worry, but actually to show empathy is quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and there will be days where you've got your own stuff going on. And let's face it, we're all humans, so the things that I've spoken about already, it's also really important that we as adults are keeping in check with our own emotions, our own sensations, and how the language that we use and how we come across and how we speak to our children is everything. So if we are dysregulated ourselves, it will impact that child. And it is frustrating. If you want your child to go into school and they're refusing to, of course it's going to be frustrating for you as a parent. So first things first is to self-regulate as an adult, and we can go on to some parenting strategies in a moment. But in this case, with that child that is avoiding school, sit down with them, calmly. So go through each of those things like I've spoken about. So regulate. So even if it's kind of listening to music or doing something that they really enjoy, sit down with them and go, okay, I can see that you're not wanting to go to school today. How's it, can you let me know why? Is there a reason? And it's just, we're not sort of speaking to them in a way that's like, no, you must do this. You have to kind of meet them where they're at. All behavior is communication. And I repeat that over and over again. So if a child is refusing to go to school, if a child is refusing to do anything or playing up at home or in school, they're telling us something. They're communicating that there is a need that is being unmet. So if a child is refusing to go to school, it's supporting them accordingly to find out what is going on. If it's separation anxiety, often it is working with the school, possibly doing soft starts to get them to school gradually. If it is something where there's something bigger going on, like they're being bullied, or speaking to the school and coming up with a plan. The most important thing is working with the child and giving them the power so they feel empowered. So I would probably sit down, connect with them, relate with them, create a safe space, feel that they're listened to. And if they're saying, nope, don't want to go, it's like, so finding out why they don't want to go, and if they're still refusing to go, speaking to the school and finding out what's happening, and then supporting them where you can. Explaining, that using things like the zones of regulation, which can be quite helpful, to say, I see can you tell me where you are on the zones of regulation? Okay, that's absolutely fine. What can we do to help you get back to the green zone? Or why is it that you think that might be happening? And really focusing on what they can do. So it might be that they're worried about handing in their homework because they haven't done the homework. So it's important to build a trusted, safe relationship and connect with the child so they feel that they can go to you. So whether it's using the zones, whether it's using something else, another tool that they enjoy, it's getting them to open up and express what's going on with them, normalizing it's okay to not be okay, then coming up with a plan for them so they can either go into school if they feel ready, if you want that, so it's meeting that child where they're at. And it's not going to be a clear-cut case. There may be, again, like I said, all behavior is communication. There may be a valid reason why that child does not want to go to school, and it's supporting them to make sure that they're safe and that they are well and that they feel supported.
Is this the concept, Nicola, as well, of co-regulate? So co-regulate as in with together. Is that what co-regulation is? You and your child regulate together so that you can then teach them the skills to self-regulate when they're ready to. Is that what that idea is, co-regulate to self-regulate?
And it's also really important to model the behavior that you want to see. So as parents, it's really key to be modeling. I know it's difficult because, we are going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, we're going to be really frustrated. And it's important to have open conversations about having a bad day. There's nothing, you're not going to be developing that child if we focus on toxic positivity. It's really key to be modeling what's working, what's not modeling, and also at the same time containing some of these things. Because I remember when I was sort of in the classroom, we'd hear children talking, I'd be like, that's not that child, that's their parent talking. So it's being really mindful of the language that we're using affirmative statements and supporting them every step of the way.
That's brilliant. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, something that I've found for me works really well, because I've had to employ a lot of these sorts of strategies. It's quite easy to say show empathy, isn't it? And that's something I think I found really, really difficult. And it's not necessarily, it's not saying, oh, I know exactly how you feel, because it's more, again, that curiosity of, oh, I wonder why you're feeling this way, and I wonder how that makes you feel. Because that word wonder is something that I've tried to do more to become a more curious parent, rather than just dive in and say, well, that you're not behaving right, so there's a sanction and there's a reward. And that's often what parents tend to do, because that's not all parents, but I know that can be default. So that's interesting. Yeah,
definitely. And what I'll do is I'll go into the different parenting styles, because that incorporates what you've just said. Because having that openness and that sense of wonder can frame things really well. So if you do have that moment where that child doesn't want to go to school, or their behavior is a way that you're thinking, oh, they're acting really differently, if you're developing a parenting style, it's going to be supportive when they're not feeling 100%. They're going to feel like they can go to you. So there's 4 different parenting styles, and then we can open it up and talk a little bit more about the different animal models. These have been developed by psychiatrists and psychologists. These are not things that I've suddenly made up on my own, but we've got 4 different main ones. So we've got the permissive parenting style, where there is this sense of you can have whatever you want. There's lots of love, there's lots of encouragement, there's lots of nurturing and empathy, but it's a case of there are no boundaries or rules. There's the uninvolved parenting style, where there's this sense of don't really care, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And again, that's going to impact that child's ability to communicate with you, and as well feel that they're valued, seen and heard. There is the authoritarian style, which is, I said so you must do this, you have to do this right now. And that, again, is very controlling, and that child is just going to shut down. They're going to completely shut down. They're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel seen. They're not going to feel nurtured or encouraged. And again, there's no empathy there. There's no kindness, there's no caring. It's just, this is what I've said, this is what I've done. And again, what we tend to forget when we're communicating with children is that every interaction is an intervention. Every interaction is an intervention. So everything that we're saying is either harming that child or supporting that child. So we have to just see it very black and white. So if we're being very controlling, it's not really setting them up for life. They're going to be really restricted and really doubt themselves. And then the last one is the authoritative, which is sounds very similar to authoritarian. That's why I'm glad they've been separated. The authoritative is the let's discuss this. Okay, you don't want to go to school today. Let's sit down, let's discuss this. We don't have much time. I've got to get to work. You've got to get to school. Time is ticking. What's going on, mate? Okay, right. Let's put our cards on the table. You went to school yesterday. Did something happen? Let's focus on what you can do. And, if it's persistent EBSA, emotionally based school avoidance, there are specific strategies that you can put into place to support that child. It's what they can do. So it's having baby steps like graded exposure. They gradually go to school when they're ready. They meet a friend at the gate, or, there's strategies that you can put into place, very specific, but it's a team. It's that child and that parent. It's not going to happen overnight, and there will be times when we flipped from different parenting styles, but it's really, really key that the child feels seen and they feel that they can go to a trusted adult. And that's when we unknowingly develop empathy. We're kind of like, oh, okay, you just and it goes hand in hand, because all the skills that we're exhibiting, that child is actually learning as well. So shall I move on to the animal, or would you like? Are there any questions?
No. Yeah, I was just interested because it feels like the authoritative, the way you were saying it, is a good one, because it feels like it has a balance of clear boundaries, but also with empathy. And would you say if you can get that? But obviously, it depends on the child and the parent and the dynamic. But that's often something that we talk about again in our family with our situation. Is no, the children still need clear boundaries, but it doesn't have to be because I said so, I'm right, you're wrong, like Miss Trunchbull and Matilda. It can still be, I'm doing this to keep you safe, but I'm also still showing, like you said, real wonder and curiosity about you and your feelings. And if you can get that balance, then you are ultimately trying to make that young person feel safe, aren't you? Which is like kind of one of the key things that you want to get across. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, please move on. Yeah, I'm really interested to know about the animals, because yeah, I just want to reiterate again that you didn't come up with this, Nicola, right? This is
I just made it up. So this parenting model is a new Maudsley approach, and it was championed by Dr. Janet Treasure along with others. It's in a book to talk about, and it was actually related to eating disorders. But as with everything, a lot of these things, like with Dan Siegel's and Dr. Perry's approaches I spoke to you about earlier, they're all trauma informed. They often go hand in hand with other mental health conditions, including anxiety. So this animal model is a parenting approach, and I love it because it's very visual. Can't take the primary school teacher out of me, but it's also really lovely when I'm with parents and I walk them through this, because sometimes we're unaware of our behaviors. We're unaware of our own conditioning that we bring from our own childhoods, and we bring this into our own journey of parenting. And there's no manual when it comes to parenting. So let's begin with the ostrich. The ostrich has basically got their head stuck in the stand, and they're a parent that avoids emotion. They kind of look away from what's going on, and they kind of just go, oh, don't worry about it. Just get on with it. Doesn't matter, And again, that's not very safe or supportive for that child, because they're not going to be able to connect with their emotions, and they're going to find it very difficult as they progress through their schools and navigate different relationships. Then you've got the kangaroo parenting style, where they jump into everything and they try and make everything right. It's like, it's okay. It's almost like one of the other ones I just spoke about. They kind of just try and make everything right. So they jump in. Oh, it's all right. I've got this. Don't worry. I can sort that out. I've got this. And again, that's really lovely, but it also doesn't prepare that child for those, life skills or decision making or resilience or confidence. So again, that's kind of a very unstructured and doesn't really set that child up for life. The jellyfish, which is about too much emotion or very little control. So they're kind of almost smothering that child, taking over. Or you've got the rhino, where the rhino uses logic to take, right, I've got this, what's going on? They kind of charge in. There's that saying, it's like a bull in the china shop, just wants to get everything sorted. And again, it's kind of not actually putting that child's feelings at the center, you know. So again, like we said, like you mentioned about a child not wanting to go to school, or even a child feeling anxious about putting their hand up and then going home really upset and not actually realizing what that is. If you've got a parenting style like on the outside of these, that the anxiety is going to continue. However, on the middle, we've got the dolphin and the St. Bernard. So we've got the dolphin where they're swimming along in the ocean, and they have the baby dolphins alongside them. They're guiding them, they're going ahead, or they're encouraging their children to go side by side, then gradually allowing them to take the lead, but they're closely behind them. So it's kind of, like riding a bike. When you're teaching a child to ride a bike, they've got the stabilizers on, and then you eventually take them off, and you're by them, making sure they don't fall off. That's your dolphin, and that's a really nice way of just having enough caring and control as a parenting style. Then you've got the St. Bernard, where there's similar to the dolphin, but there's just enough compassion and consistency. And the word consistency is key, because if you have a dysregulated child and your parenting style is one way, on one day you're saying this about a certain situation, and the second day, another day, you're saying something completely different about the same situation, that's not going to support that child's anxiety. That's going to get worse, or just their sense of worth and their sense of well-being. So it's really key that we are mindful. And to be honest, as we are human beings, so on any one day we may need to be more rhino and take charge. Say, come on, let's go. If you're running to catch a plane or something, and your child is dilly-dallying, you might, come on, let's, there will be elements of each of these, because no one can be the perfect dolphin or the St. Bernard. We're all human beings, but it's also really mindful to check in on ourselves and how our behavior is received, and how our behavior is shaping the lives of the young people and the children in our world. So at home, particularly. So hopefully that gives you a nice clear overview of the different parenting styles. And then what I mentioned previously with the different strategies, now we'll talk about one more strategy afterwards, is that we can't put those strategies in place if, as a parent, we're dysregulated, or an adult or a teacher, you're dysregulated. It's really important to be self-aware, adopt that notion of curiosity, like you said earlier, Jez, and perhaps doing some self-evaluation. Oh, I think I might be more kangaroo. How can I be more dolphin? What sort of things can I do? Or actually, I'm more ostrich. Or you can think of different situations where your child has come to you, or you've been really busy in your computer. Oh, I'll come back to you in a minute. And it's like, well, actually, and it's not to guilt trip anyone, but it's to say we're all human beings, but being really mindful that we're setting the tone for our child's future. So being aware of ourselves, being aware of our own emotions, accessing our own emotions, and not being hard on ourselves, being self-compassionate as parents, as adults, as individual, is key. But ideally, to be more dolphin, because I love the sea, and have that sense of compassion and consistency, like the dog, that is what we want. But in the real world, we will be any of these in any one day. It's just perhaps bringing them all together, but being aware that we are going to need to change in different situations, but being aware that our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, what we model is potentially going to be mirrored to that child. So it's really key that we're just mindful of that.
So interesting. And again, looking at that diagram, I've not seen those animals. I'm already thinking about the sort of animal. I feel like I was probably like a half kangaroo, half rhino, like by default. And I feel like what you're saying is really, again, so interesting for me, because it's taken me years, and I'm definitely making lots of mistakes still as a parent, to become self-aware enough that my logical, fairly authoritarian PE style way of like, because I was a PE teacher, obviously, way of becoming a parent, to try and bring some control and some rationale back to things, has meant that I probably haven't, and I'm not beating myself up, I'm just being self-aware, haven't
Being
connected.
honest.
Yeah, being honest, I haven't connected empathically and emotionally, because I think that's the really hard bit for people sometimes.
Yeah.
I think for parents, we just want everything to be okay, and we just want to use logic, and we want to go, but why? You had enough sleep and you didn't eat that, and that shouldn't have happened. And you want that control because it is chaotic. But it's almost, you've got to buy into the connection side, the co-regulation side, the team side of it. I think we are in this together. We are a team. I think that's, and for me, myself, that's definitely something that's really worked, is that it's trying to kind of reaffirm that it is not, you're not on your own. We are a team. We're a family. We're in it together. And, we feel your pain and your suffering, and we're here to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like I said before, there's no manual for parenting. You don't get given a manual to be the perfect parent, and we're human beings.
Do you feel like now parents should get a manual, because it is so complicated? Like with social media, you mentioned before, we haven't even touched on. It's almost like there should be more of that available. Do you think?
I mean, there are books. I mean, the Whole Brain Child is fantastic for parents to support emotional health and well-being, and there are lots of different books. But the thing is, we can read these things, but when we put it into practice, it doesn't always marry up. We can we'll pick up the tips that we think will be helpful, but it's just everyone is going to be different. I think there should be a manual, but in reality, we're all going to be coming from different backgrounds, different lived experiences. Our children will have different neurodivergencies. We're going to have different, there's going to be different things that crop up. So I think it's helpful, but parenting is one of those things that you just have to do. And it can be messy, it can be, but you end up finding your way along the way, and it can be the most beautiful thing. So I think in an ideal world, there would be a manual, but then what we wouldn't want is for it to be too constricted. We want to be meeting children where they're at and be guided by them. Their childhood is supposed to be the most, this child is where they're developing and becoming the adults of tomorrow. So it's our responsibility to keep them safe, but also be playful and enjoy, help them enjoy themselves and enjoy the life that they've got. So yeah, a manual would be great, but I think, yeah.
Nicola, just one thing I was thinking there as well. Parents that are listening to this, whether they're live now or they're watching this back, or listening to it back, should not beat themselves up if they're looking at and hearing, they might be thinking, oh, it's a jellyfish and I'm over emotional or whatever. They shouldn't beat themselves up, right? And they should also, it's never too late to become self-aware and make a difference, even though like you said, every conversation has an impact one way or the other. Even if your children are getting older, would you still say, look, you should still be open to becoming and becoming self-aware and thinking a bit more about your parenting style so that it works for you and your children?
Definitely. And I think it is reminding ourselves that we're all on a journey. Parenting is tough. It can be, it's the most beautiful thing, but it can also be really tough. It's very challenging, but we're all at different levels. Do not beat yourself up. Practicing self-compassion is key. Connecting with other parents is also great as well. And also, in many areas, they will have parenting groups. They'll have send parent groups. They'll have, lots of different parenting groups. So if you are struggling, or if you're thinking, gosh, I'm not getting this right, look onto your local council's website and see what the local offer is, see what things are being provided. Parenting groups are really helpful, because a lot of the time parents, particularly single parents, they feel like they're on their own. And if they've got a child that is experiencing mental health difficulties, whether it's severe anxiety or another condition, they often beat themselves up and they feel really angry and really frustrated. But a really good thing to do is reach out for help, speak to other parents, speak to professionals as well. And don't be so hard on yourself, because no one's got it figured out. We often think, oh, that person's all sorted. You see the 2.4 kids, lovely car outside, this. You go inside, it's a different story. Go inside the house, different story. So no one's got it figured out. We're all on a journey. We're all trying to pave our way. So hopefully that helps reassure people. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicola. Can we talk a bit about your Breathe Tap Flow? Now, I'm going to be really honest. I did this today, I've done it. I've seen some, yeah, I've seen some of your videos, and I've got a confession.
Oh,
When you do, when you do the breathing and you hum when you breathe out,
yeah.
on your video, I was trying to do the harmonies with your hum, but I couldn't quite get
Oh,
it. Yeah. So when you were breathing out, go, I was going, but I just couldn't. I couldn't quite get it. But I genuinely did it, and I'm really interested in it. I don't know much about it. I know that it's something that you're passionate about. And can we talk a
oh,
bit about? Can we talk a bit about that and whether
yeah.
parents how you talked about mindfulness and breathing techniques, and I know a lot of going to go into the EFT stuff in a minute. And I'm really interested in how you see maybe parents and again parents and their children working through this sort of thing together.
Yeah, definitely. So, mindfulness, I'm very passionate about. I saw the benefits of this in the classroom, and when I'm teaching children, when I'm doing mindfulness workshops, I love it because and adults as well. I was doing a formal CAMS work conference the other week, and partway through my session, I got everyone to stand up and do some grounding activities and then do some breathing, and they all loved it because they were so used to sitting down and just having words, But I think, when I spoke about regulate, relate, reason, it, sometimes children are so dysregulated. All you need to do is just be with them and make them feel safe. And a lovely way to do this, you can meet them where they're at. You can do this whole hog, or you can just make this really, really tiny, is something like Breathe Tap Flow. And this is a program that I've developed. And thank you for reminding me, because I almost forgot to talk about it. And it's a 3-step process. So first we start with the breath. And for me, mindfulness or anything, it's the first thing we do when we're born, and it's the last thing we do when we leave. So the breath is key. And when a child or an adult is dysregulated, they're panting almost, the shoulders are high, and their shortness of breath, you see them breathing up here. Whereas if we are relaxed and calm, they're doing full body breathing, and they're just more grounded and they're more centered. So the first part is breathe. However, if a young person has experienced high levels of trauma, I would not start with breathe. So it's being really mindful of knowing your child at home and meeting them where they're at. So I wouldn't start with breathe, I'd start with the next part. But
Nicola, where would you class trauma? I wanted to ask you that because people might think trauma is, and it is really serious stuff,
yeah,
But would you class even, some of the stuff that we've been talked about at the beginning of this webinar, post-pandemic, the news is traumatic. Where do we draw the line with trauma?
it depends on the person. So you'll have two people that will go through exactly the same event. One person will walk away unaffected, the other person will be traumatized. Same event, two different people, but two different lived experiences, two different frames of reference. So trauma is what you give meaning to. So for instance, two children might be living in the same house with an alcoholic parent. One child finds it really traumatic, never touches a drop of alcohol. Both children find it traumatic. One doesn't touch a drop of alcohol and lives, a normal life. I put that in commas or whatever. The other is an alcoholic. They've both been through the same amount of trauma, violence, and things in the household. The other turns out to be an alcoholic and follows that parent's footsteps as they grow older. Trauma is basically what you give meaning to. And there are traumatic things like the pandemic. We often attributed trauma to PTSD with soldiers coming back from war and the things that they've seen. But trauma can, for a child, adverse child experiences, moving home, divorce, friendship breakups, there's all different things, but it basically is what you give meaning to. And it's normally unexpected, comes out of the blue. It's something that it just shakes us, but it's dependent on that person. That's why it's really important to be listening to understand that child, meeting them where they're at, creating safe spaces, and building those resilience skills straight away as much as we can, and modeling that as adults. And if a child does experience a traumatic event, again, normalizing that that's okay, but seeking professional help to make sure that they are held and that they are safe. The things that we spoke about today are all trauma informed, particularly the regulate, relate, reason. So I would definitely explore those, but getting professional help is key. But if, like I said, with the breathe, tap, flow, starting with the breath, if a child has just gone through something quite traumatic and they're just really overwhelmed and stuck, it's really important to get professional help first before doing any breathing activities. It might be absolutely fine, but with trauma, things, our emotions, I'll move on to the next part and that'll probably make more sense. But so we've got the breathe part. Did that answer your question,
Yeah,
Jez?
it did. Thank you. Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've got breathe, so we've got the breathing activities, and as I mentioned earlier, there's different types of breathing activities. So within that video, I think I was doing hum. So within the anxiety breathe, tap, flow, I was doing humming. You can also do lots of different things, like I've shown you before with the breathing ball. You can do what's it called? You can do breathing around the hands, and the reason why I like to use humming for anxiety is that there are studies that suggest that humming helps calm the brain down and is very good in response to anxiety. So it really reduces the levels of anxiety. So you take a nice deep breath in and you breathe out. What you can do, I mean, you wouldn't just do the one hum, you do several. And if it does feel a little bit funny, you can hum along to your favorite tune. You can do lots of different things, but the idea is that you're breathing in and then you're taking a really long exhale. And this again brings us into the parasympathetic nervous system. It basically brings us into a nice calmer state. So that I think is key. So that's the humming, or you can do other breathing activities. And again, breathing is there's been lots of studies to suggest how beneficial it is for anxiety and other conditions. And then there's tapping. So tapping is a clinical science-backed method. Again, there's been lots of studies to suggest that tapping is effective for anxiety. And for those that have never heard of tapping, where have you been? Tapping, thank you. It's emotional freedom technique. So EFT is based on traditional Chinese medicine. And what you're doing is because when we spoke about trauma, whenever we experience anything, whether it's traumatic, it's what we give meaning to. And we have emotions that are in different parts of our bodies. So it might be, if you're feeling anxious, you might get sweaty palms, you might get a rumbly tummy or busy thoughts and a headache. And when you tap on the different acupuncture points and just recognize that it's okay to have these feelings, these sensations, and you just verbalize them, say, even though I'm feeling anxious, I completely accept myself anyway. And you just tap on the different acupuncture points, just nice and slowly, and you just talk, even if you just talk like we're talking now and have a conversation. After a few rounds, it helps you come back into a more relaxed state. It may take a few rounds, and if you're at home or if you're in the class, if you're teaching your child to do this at home and you're thinking actually it'd be really good for them to do in the classroom, doing this in the middle of a lesson is not going to be, the child's going to stand out and it's not going to. So what I love to, when I'm working with children, is to tap on the fingertips. So I encourage you to do the same, Jez. So tapping on the fingertips is a really nice way, because we have meridians or energy centers at the end of each of our fingers. And this again is connected to helping us send messages to the brain to just feel calm and relaxed. So when we tap on the fingers, and even if so a child can be doing this at school with their hands under the table and that you just wouldn't know. So tapping in this sense is a lovely way of just, again, calming the brain down and bringing us into the here and now. We've done breathe, we've done tap, and then flow. So the activity I did for flow, for breathe, tap, flow for anxiety, this is the grounding part. So this is where we come back into the here and now. So we can find, so I do free. So I get the child to look for 3 things that they can see. So Jez, I'll get you to be the child in this sense. 3 things that you can see in front of you at the moment.
A guitar, tennis racket, and a cap.
A cap. Oh, nice. Lovely. And if we had more time, I'd ask you a bit more about each of those, but that's fine. 3 things that you can hear.
Traffic, My Apple Watch just went off. I can just about hear my 11-year-old. He's been quite good.
Okay, lovely. And I want you to touch 3 things in front of you
Okay.
and say what they are.
Okay, my notepad, the microphone, hope it didn't make a funny noise, and the lamp.
The lamp. Brilliant, brilliant. And again, that kind of takes us into the senses. Free. You look, so that's a lovely one for anxiety. A nice quick method that you can do, that parents can do with children. So Brief Tap Flow, I've got lots of different activities online on my YouTube channel, and yourselves have kindly shared some on the youHQ platform. So yeah.
Nicola, do you find that the audience, whether it's a parent speaking to their child, you speaking to a room of teachers, or whoever you're speaking to, do you ever feel like there's still stigma around it? Because I'm breath work I've really bought into, and actually, if anything, for me as a parent, just stopping me from diving into being that, whichever the animal was, diving in and trying to, probably being a bit too emotional and reactive. I've actually really tried just to breathe, to take myself almost back into my own body, so I can relax, and I can try to relax, and I can then try and do all those things we've talked about. How much stigma do you find there is around that, and how difficult is it for parents? Because again, it's so good and it's so helpful, and even doing it, I think it really works. But how do you get people to buy in? And as a parent, how do you get your child to buy in?
I think first of all, it's best. Sorry, I've got my cat joining us now.
I should have asked you. I should have asked you what 3 things you can see.
Oh, I can see my cat, and I can see you, and I can see my red top.
We're back in the room.
I think what I tend to do, when I'm with parents or teachers, you can normally spot the ones that are like, oh God, what's all this woo-woo stuff? You can see by the body language and the eyes. You can always tell by the eyes. So they'll either avoid eye contact, or they'll just be like that. It's basically meeting them where they're at and showing them, I've forgotten that quote. Basically, there is a lovely quote which has just gone out of my brain. It's about involving that person, and then they will learn. So if you teach me, it's fine. If you tell me, it's fine. But if you involve me, I will learn and I will remember. So like I said, at the CAMS conference, which was brilliant the other week, had a room full of clinical psychologists, CAMS professionals, clinical psychologists, as well as teachers. So it was just totally different bag. But I got everyone to stand up and do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, which was similar to 3, 3, 3. We did a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. Then I had some synchronized breathing on the screen, and they all did it. And I could see the room just relax and calm. There'll always be people that don't get it and are not interested. The thing to do is just continue to show them, let them experience it for themselves, because there's no point in them telling their child to do it if they don't believe in it themselves. And it's no point in me trying to convince someone if they've got their own view, and that's okay. We've all got our own different perspectives, our own lived experiences, but it's really important that there is a stigma, anything like breathing with yoga, anything like that, anything to do with mindfulness, but the evidence says it all. There's so much scientific research with tapping. I know this seems a bit woo-woo. I love tapping, and it's clinically proven. There's been so many studies, evidence-based studies, to prove that this stuff works. Waiting lists are long. The mental health is increasing. What can we do in the home? What can we do in school in terms of early intervention? Some of these practical strategies, like mindfulness, like the other bits that we've spoken about today, can make a difference, and they're all evidence-based.
Thanks, Nicola. Where with you train staff in schools, there's training available for not just teachers, right, on your website. Can you tell us a bit more about how do we, as parents and or as teachers, both maybe, how do we find out a bit more about learning some of the techniques that you talked about, and what sort of things have you got planned coming up?
Yeah, so you can find out more about me by going to my website, harveyheals.com, and the heels is HEALS.com, not as in shoes, heels, because people seem. So harveyheals.com, and my website basically has lots of different information on me, and what I do, and the training that I provide. So there's a speaker page, and it gives you a bit of information on the different types of training, whether it's mental health, whether it's anti-racism in schools, whether it's mindfulness, teacher wellbeing, or supervision for staff. That's all on there. And I'm in the process of launching from April an online course. And this online course will include, is all about anxiety and tapping. So the tapping that we spoke about earlier, parents and teachers will be able to log on to this platform, be taken through the psychoeducation behind what anxiety is, how it impacts children and young people, and some really nice practical strategies alongside tapping to help their child regulate and co-regulate alongside their child. So lots of different things, but this I'm very excited about to be launching this very soon, but it's specifically on anxiety, because we know early intervention and lots of different things need to be available. And if anyone is interested, please go to my website, www.harveyhills.com/courses, and sign up to be notified when the course is released in April 2024.
And that can be anyone. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be a teacher in a school. It can be a parent. It can just be anyone who's interested in this. They might be working with children in a different way.
Definitely, and that's a really good point. So this information is available for anyone that is interested. I'm also a published author, and I've written 2 books. I'm going to grab my other book very quickly, because I realise we're out of time almost.
Yeah, we've got. No, that's all right. We've got 4 minutes. We're good.
So self-care activity book for kids. This is for the younger ones. And this is basically lots of different activities, breathing, lots of problem solving, talking to children about their feelings. A really nice, light, soft book to support children's mental health and emotional well-being. And of course, there's lots of diverse characters in there, which for me is really important. And just encouraging children to help build their self-esteem as well. So if you are a parent, if you are a practitioner, if you're a teacher, you can have a look at that. And that is available. And there's also something that's more targeted at adults, which is Mindful Little Yogis, my other book. And this is particularly if you have a child that has special educational needs. And there's a lot of information on there, lots and lots of breathing activities with the therapeutic benefits of those to support the child to help them self-regulate. So again, you don't have to be a parent, you can be a practitioner or a teacher. So lots of ways to develop and work with me. But if you are not sure, just head to my website, have a nose around and send me an email, and I'll be happy to support. Yeah.
Guys, I think you can tell I've been lucky enough to speak to Nicola a few times live on her podcast. I've heard her speak to teachers. She's brilliant, inspiring, passionate, really personable. So yeah, can't recommend her highly enough. Thank you so much, Nicola, for giving up your time today. It's really nice to actually talk a bit more about you and your work in a bit more detail. Look, this is so difficult, and I feel like I've got a proper catchphrase that's come through from you, which is meet them where they're at. You need to write a book called Meet Them Where They're At, because that's totally your catchphrase, and I really like that term. I've not heard that way of saying it before. Meet them where they're at. It's really nice.
You know what? I did something for School TV, which is an Australian mental health organisation, and they came to London. We did some filming, and they said exactly the same thing. They said, "That's your catchphrase: meet them where they're at. Meet them where they're at." And you don't. I didn't realise, but
I'm going to hashtag that when I see you on LinkedIn. I'm going to put that little hashtag underneath in your comments. But can you? I feel like that's been. We've talked about so much, and it's really interesting. Would you say for parents, for teachers, for anyone that's listening, that's kind of, if you can do anything, that's like kind of the most important bit, is to try and that is kind of how you start the empathetic journey, is meeting the child where they're at. Would you say that's the key takeaway?
Definitely, because we can't change a dysregulated child. If they're not in their thinking brain, we're not going to be able to access them. It's kind of just meeting them where they're at, holding space, and creating a safe space to help them regulate and then calm down. Yeah, so definitely meeting them where they're at. Gosh.
Yeah, and I think that whether you're a parent out there or a teacher, and I was a teacher, and now I'm a parent of tricky boys, those moments where you feel emotional as a parent because things aren't going the way you want them to go, whether that's their anxiety, their behaviour, a mixture of both, and like Nicola said, sometimes bad behavior, but there's a reason for that bad behavior. That is that, it's not just bad behavior. There's something behind that. And the key thing is trying to connect with your children, whether you're teaching them, whether you're a parent of them, as much as you can. And then a lot of the good stuff that you talked about comes from there, doesn't it, Nicola? The compassion and the empathy and the connection and everything comes from that position.
And it's focusing on what they can do. Those I can statements. And like you said, being curious, I wonder if, it's kind of really trying to reframe it and just being on board with that child, because we'll find that we're being empathetic and compassionate without even realizing it. So by doing that, it really helps and supports them. Yeah.
Nicola, thank you so much. Please do go to Nicola's website. Sophie's put, I think, nearly all the links we've talked about throughout the webinar. So again, Nicola, I can't wait to actually see you soon. Good luck with all the work, the amazing work that you're doing in schools and with parents. And thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. And it's been great talking to you. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jez.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.